What's up, cinephiles and Netflix fans? A big treat comes for the fans of the iconic and long-lived Hasbro franchise, The Transformers, as Netflix releases a 3-part anime series adaptation focusing on its first-generation story. For today's video, I'll be reviewing Transformers War for Cybertron Part 1 Siege, created by James Barbatano and Drew Hopper. But before I start with my review, I urge you guys to hit that subscribe button for weekly reviews on movies, TVs, and occasionally video games. Okay, first things first, on a surface level, let's talk about the animation and the nostalgia factor. This series is much closer to the original show that debuted back in the 80s, so think of this as a reboot of that show rather than an animated spin-off of the blockbuster movie franchise. The animation is at its best yet, the level of detail from metal scratches to the various terrain of the Cybertron that reminded us of the once prosperous civilization. I am honestly floored, and at times I find myself mesmerized by these backdrop elements. Yes, in its essence, it's a show about talking and fighting robots, but the level of precision and thought for this world and character design takes this show to anything but lifeless. That I can guarantee. The voice work is pretty fine too, and my personal standouts would have to be the voice actors for Megatron and Starscream, who very much resemble the inflections of the original voice cast. So all in all, in terms of visual and sound design, this new improved version has a strong sense of nostalgia going on. The story baseline, like most of the recent adaptations, remains to be Autobots versus Decepticons, with Autobots being the good guys and the Decepticons being the bad guys. Planet Cybertron is dying and the Autobots want to take the Allspark, a sacred energy and life source, out of the hands of the Decepticons, whose goal is to dominate the whole universe and annihilate anyone who comes against their way. In here, however, there's subtlety and nuance provided in the central conflict. For example, the leader of the Decepticons, Megatron, who's most of the time reduced to a one-dimensional villain, happens to have a history with Optimus Prime. He used to be a freedom fighter along with Prime and his lieutenant Ultra Magnus, but they seem to grow apart upon reaching moral crossroads on their beliefs and principles. Now, this is the first time that I've encountered this backstory, and while there are no flashbacks and it's only mentioned in passing through the dialogues, I like to fancy their relationship somewhat akin to Professor X and Magneto, who used to be brothers, both fighting for what they believe is right, but their conflicting methodologies has drastically transformed their core values. For Megatron, I'm not going to say that his character is well fleshed at this point, but I would say that he's two-dimensional at best. Given, however, his track record, I think that's already an improvement. On the other hand, Optimus Prime remains to be a straight shooter, the heroic voice of reason who's always looking out for the best interests of the majority and pro to harmonious relationships. This could be seen on the downside as being predictable and boring, but once in a while there are some characters like Elita 1 who brings Optimus' character back to Earth, or Cybertron for that matter. That alone reminds its young audiences that you may have the noblest intentions, but that doesn't mean you already know the best ways to achieve that. As for the lore of Cybertron, I believe there's much meat to the story than what is teased in the dialogues. Ancient deities like Alpha Trion and the Guardians make an appearance, but their backstory are not necessarily explained. This can be quite frustrating at times because expositions and flashbacks will do a great deal to further enrich the myth of the story, but since they're working on 6 episodes, they have to skip that to make each episode as action-packed as possible. That, or I would like to think that they're strategically saving those for parts 2 and 3. Speaking of action sequences, the show continues to honor the constant transforming abilities. There's one character here, RC, who can combine with another robot. However, the inherent limitation present in previous adaptations, since we are dealing with huge bulky machines, fight choreography can be stiff and limited at times. I also think it's a wise decision to spend more time on the supporting characters, especially the ones who prove to be morally ambiguous, as they create complexity and further debunks the premise of being simply good versus evil. In particular, there's Ratchet, a former Autobots weapon designer who decides to forge a new path as a medic to atone for his wrongdoings. He vows to aid any injured Cybertronian regardless of their faction. And then there's Jetfire, a Decepticon lieutenant who goes into moral crisis as he realizes that he's only fighting for Megatron's ego and desire for revenge, and not necessarily for the betterment of Cybertron. The only character, however, who I can say had a complete arc is Bumblebee. We find him here in an interesting and neutral position, a scrap scavenger who'll do whatever it takes to get out of the way of the war. I like to think that the young audience can learn from his arc that neutrality in the face of crisis is not really a desirable position to be in, and here Bumblebee eventually chooses a path that is more aligned to his beliefs and values, as he plays this pivotal role in the series. Overall, War for Cybertron Part 1 Siege lays a foundation that is sturdy enough to reboot the franchise once again and not just give an excuse to showcase robot fights, much to the delight of the younger audiences. Execution-wise, I don't think it offers anything much new, but there's a fascinating dark tone that permeates as we see both factions scarred and at the end of their resources, and that is enough for me to get hooked. It can feel rushed at times, but I'm not gonna put much blame on the writers because I believe that the strength of this franchise is found in the friendships that will be forged by the Autobots with the humans. I am particularly fond of the 2018 spin-off movie Bumblebee, and that once again revived the franchise, rebuked that negative reputation that the recent Michael Bay films are getting. As for the character development, it remains to be half-baked for most of the characters, but I'm going to be more forgiving on that since this is a 3-part series and there's more to come. This one is shaping to be a worthy animated series. It's not there yet, but I believe this one makes this beloved franchise relevant for at least one more decade. For now, I'm going to give this one a 3.5 out of 5 rating. That's it for my review of Transformers War for Cybertron Part 1 Siege. If you enjoyed watching this video, please give us a like and consider subscribing to Screen Kings for weekly discussions about TV, movie, and video games. Till then guys, see you on the next one.